Okay, so for this week, for part 5 and 6, let's actually build something because I think it's more fun. I was looking back and I think hopefully now you have the basics for how you set up your dev environments, how you use live server and some of the HTML and CSS. But now let's actually build a little something because I think that's a little more fun. So I have the instructions set up and I'm going to use my Alt tab to move over to my editor. Okay, to my VS Code. In VS Code, I'm going to change it to where I open my HTML directory. And I recommend for this you do the same. So I'm going to open folder. Okay. I'm going to navigate to my directory. I'm going to navigate to my private, to my lectures, and click once on the HTML and CSS. And then that will open that inside of there. And then I would also open up my terminal, I'd open up my index, and I'd go ahead and fire up live server. Okay, so cool, that's where we left off. So what I want you to do first, once you get all that, is go in here to the body and get rid of everything we had in the body, okay, at this point. And then we're actually going to, like I said, start building something. So let's actually call this my website. That sounds good. We have a CSS file already. We'll get rid of this for now because we're actually going to style it more like you would if you were really actually building something. So what we're going to do in this is we're going to start by, last time I was just showing you some basic elements. And I'm going to try to be more consistent and call them elements. But in this case, I'm actually going to use something that is, we call it semantically important, because this is something you're going to learn about if you take 85. So it doesn't hurt, and you probably will see it also in Bootstrap, so it won't hurt. So I'm going to do header and hit tab. So that's going to create a block level element. Okay, now block basically just means it's blocking out that section. And so in there, I'm actually going to do a header H1, and I'll say welcome to my website. Okay. Now the other thing you could very well see in the future is something called nav. We're not going to do one, and nav would be a navigation of the site. But there are other things that you might see in the header, but think of the header as the top part of the page. Okay, so before we move too much further, I'm going to go ahead and do something that I often do when I'm coding. I'm going to drop, because at this point I have both files open that I need, and actually I'm going to go ahead and put my CSS over here, even though there's nothing in it. I'm going to drop this, and then I'm going to make my whole editor a little bit smaller, do this, and then come over here and pull this out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is attempt to have this set up so that I can pretty much see as I go the code as it exists here. Now you can do this however you want. I just like to do it because it makes it a little bit easier for me. So now what I'm going to do is now I'm going to style the body. Just some basic styles that I want on the body, right? So here we go, on the body itself, right? Now at this point, you'll get a little squiggly line because it's a rule set. This is what this is. We're writing a CSS rule set, and there's nothing in there. So I'm going to do font family, right? And I'm going to say Arial. Now, if you remember me saying this last time, and by the way, notice immediately you can see over here what happens is it applies that immediately, right? We can that's cool. I can already see that happening. And this is a fallback. So if the browser can't find Arial, it'll look for a Helvetica, and if it can't Helvetica, it'll do a sans serif, because almost every browser would have that. And now I'm going to do something that it will seem kind of weird. And I'm going to do margin 0. I'm going to do padding 0. Okay. Now why am I going to do this? I'm going to drop here into inspect. Under inspect, okay. And this will be one of those things we kind of have to play around with to just get it to all show up. So for a minute, I'm going to pull this over just a little bit. Now in mine, I have something and it's up here at the top called responsive design. You can see the dimensions that it's using a percentage, like if I put it at 100% here, it'd do that. But the other thing is you might wonder, why did I set margin, right, to 0? And that's because the browser itself has some built-in values. And let me just show you what I mean by that. So, and this is something I showed you last time, is that the idea of that you can come into DevTools, and if I took off, and I want you to see this space here, if I took off margin and I took off padding, more margin you can immediately see, right? You can see, do them back, right? So what happens is the browser itself, and we call this, the browser has its own CSS standard, what we call a user setting, right? There's other names that you may hear applied to this, but it's basically the browser has some of its own CSS. And so by doing margin and padding at 0, we're doing a simple what we call reset. So we're saying, you know what, reset those to 0, so later when I want to set them to something they're not already set to something already that I have to then take into consideration. So it's just a reset, okay? Again, there's more involved resets, but for now we're just going to do a simple one. Okay, and we're going to do text align. So align text, now let's just bring this before I do this. Now I haven't completed that rule set. Okay, and notice what is already happening over here, right? So this is already telling me it's an error. And you can see it here as well. Like there's an error, you didn't complete that, right? So in this case we have the rule set, right? And inside the rule set, right, you can see that now we're defining specific things within that rule set. Okay, so we're saying font, margin, right? Okay, so it's the whole thing is called a rule set. This is called a selector. So what it's saying is select the body and apply this CSS to it, these styles to it. So I'm going to say center here. And you can immediately see what happens. And by the way, it is important that you do put semicolon at the end. Sometimes the browser, right, if we were to just take it off, the browser would still figure it out. It's just good syntax to always put it there. And there'll be times that if you don't, it will actually throw you off. So it's just good to have it. Now, it might have been a little hard to see, but if you make this a little bigger, right, then you can really see it. And again, this is where learning DevTools is so helpful, because I could take that off. Now, again, a little harder to see here. Matter of fact, if I was to say, you know what, show that to me at 75%, and I was to take that off, then I can clearly see that what text align. So what it's saying is align that text to center. Now, aligning things in CSS becomes much more involved, so we're just doing simple CSS here. Okay? All right, so here's your first commit. Go ahead and do your first commit, and your first commit will just be body CSS. Okay? Body CSS will be your first commit on this one. Go ahead and just do your git add, git commit, and don't have to do git push yet. All right, so now let's come back here. So let's also actually do some styling on the header, right? So there's our rule set. Specifically now, our selector is on the header. Okay, so now we're saying we styled this as the entire body, everything, right? So if you click in here, now there's nothing really on our site, but now we're being more specific. And this is very much what you learn with CSS as you go from very general, like say it applies to everything in the body, to more specific. Specificity, which is not easy for me to say, becomes important the more you learn CSS, because you can target things very precisely, but we're just going from very wide to a little more narrow. Now it's saying now only the header right here. Okay, so within the header, let's go background color. And I'm going to show you a little trick here, because color is very interesting when you're writing CSS. By default, it'll give you what you probably have commonly seen as far as colors, right? So if I wanted to say, let's say, you know, blue, violet over here, You can see that applied that color. But what's kind of cool is there's much more what we call granular ways to handle and, you know, to declare color. And so if you click in here, what you can see is there's actually cool ways. Matter of fact, this gives you the equivalent red, green, and blue, because these colors are made up of, in this case, this type of color way we define colors this way. There are other ways we do it, but in this case it's basic. Matter of fact, you can see under my what we call the little tooltip, it'll say RGB, HLS, and hex. So those are kind of the most common ways. So it kind of starts again more general. You can just give it a name to move to more specific. But what I love about this in VS Code, and this is true in almost anything, is you can play around here. Like I could move this around. It would give me, and notice what's happening over here. Again, I'm going to come back. Let's say I wanted, you know, to play with that a little more. It's like, oh, that looks a little drab. I think I want something a little more primary colorish. Okay, that's looking better. So, you know, you kind of play around. The other thing you can do is you can play with the opacity. And then when you play with the opacity right here, right, makes it a little more transparent, is it actually adds an A, right? So it adds a channel into there. Now, I'm not going to go any more into this because you're going to learn this more when you get to 85, but just a quick introduction should help, right? So play around with that color, make it your own. And then again, semicolon there. So we're going to say that's the background color for now. So now when we do color now, it applies to the font. Right? Now we could have done color up here, but if we'd done that, it would apply the whole body. And anything you would see where this could create a problem later. So let's just say white for now. Okay, semicolon. And again, same thing. If I wanted to play around with this white to say, you know what, maybe make that a little more gray so it stands out. Okay, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I could play, but this is where you can spend hours playing with this kind of stuff, which is, you know, fun as well. All right, so then here's a new one. Actually, I said padding up here, but now I'm actually going to give you a little more information about this. Okay, so I'm going to say padding 10, and now we talk about the way we measure things. We define measurement in CSS, and man, there's so many different ways to do it. Like we could do pixel, which is kind of like the beginning step. Pixel is just the way we talk about a pixel on the screen, and then we call it 10 pixels, which makes it 10 of those elements itself. So 10 pixels, and then we could do 0 pixels. Okay. Now, you might wonder, why am I doing 2? Okay, we're up here, I only did 1. Actually, if you do 0, you don't have to do pixels. It automatically does it. Okay, well, let me show you why. Because padding itself can be more granular. As a matter of fact, if I come over here, and this is great to see, right? Now this was padding here. Let's actually go here. Oh yeah, I don't have it on my heading. So this is part of what I want you to learn. Like right now, I had my in my dev tools, I had selected header, so the only thing I was seeing was the CSS for header, so for body. So now click on header. And when you do that, then you get the CSS we're writing here for header. And by the way, again, you get this similar ability to pick color, which is similar to what we saw in VS Code, but it gives you that ability to play with it right in here as well. But the reason I came in here was to talk about padding. Matter of fact, drop this little caret down, and what you can see is this padding actually represents top, right, bottom, and left. And you might go, well, then why didn't we do 4? Okay, well, by doing, in this case, 10, 0, it says 10, 0, and then repeat 10, 0. So it knows the pattern we're talking about. So we're using something called shorthand properties. Okay, there is a way we could just define padding on the top, padding on the right, padding on the bottom, and padding on the left separately if we wanted to. Okay, but we could also just say, and by the way, did you notice already over here, right, if you're looking at this, what that style did is it gave that padding. And this is where you start to learn about how to, matter of fact, look at this. down over here. And this is a really nice little visual that tells you how the space for this is calculated. It's like the margin, and now it's 0 because we reset it to 0. Border, right? Border is taking, there's really no border, but we haven't said border none, so it actually is in there. And then padding we know is 10 because we set it at 10, at least on the top and the bottom. On the left and the right, there's none. So don't worry too much about understanding all that. It's something, the more you use it, the more you understand it. And it's just fun over time to get to know this stuff. Okay? Okay, so at this point now, we have over in our HTML, I'm going to kind of move this over a little bit because we're going to write a little more HTML. We have a main. And so now if I hit main and tab, this has a main element. Okay, so this is kind of the main content of our website. Now, we don't have to include stuff like header and main, but we do for semantic and accessibility reasons. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. But for now, let's just add some content. So I'm going to add a P tag here, hit tab, and put like this: web page demonstrates my first effort, or maybe not, in creating a website. Something, you get to make up some content here, right? Okay. So that's a P element. And so now within our main, and again, you come over here and you see where that's, and again, the reason, okay, the reason that it is centered here is because when we set the CSS on the body, right, it is flowing down into anything. Well, in this case, it doesn't even have to flow because it's everything we do is inside the body. So it's applying that to anything we're adding by default. That's why this is the highest level, and then we get more granular. Okay, let's come back over here. And so now we're going to add a section. Okay. And section is really cool because it's another way for us to define what places in our page that we can give special meaning to, right? And in this case, we're just going to add some simple things. I'm actually going to have you add an H2. I'm going to say my fave fruits. Okay. Cool. And then I'll do and in this case, I'm going to show you both the UL. We started talking about this a little bit last time, but we'll actually do something now. I'm going to add a UL, which should be an unordered list. Okay. Now, I'm going to do this through Emmet. So I'm actually going to do an LI times 3. Now, what this is going to do when I hit enter, it's going to create a UL and then 3 LIs for me, which is awesome. Otherwise, I would just code those individually. And I'm going to put, list your favorite, right? Apple. I'm going to say kiwi because I love kiwi, right? And then what's another one that I like? Banana. I love banana. It's one of my favorite fruits, okay? So then you come over here. So now create that UL and then here. Okay, so now once you get that working and you look at it before we start talking about it, go ahead and do another commit. Your commit here would be, right, create our coded main section and added fruits. Or yeah, it's too long actually. Let's just say added main and first section. Let's do it that way. Added main and first section. So that's your second commit. Okay. All right. Now notice on here, these bullet points, because of this text center, because look what happens, right? So text center is going to make this centered and then align these. And what you'll learn as you learn more CSS is how to handle either making these go away if you didn't want them, or aligning them directly next to that, or changing them. There's just so much you're going to learn to do that. So, but I just want you to see that in this case. Okay. So because we've written a little HTML, let's actually go ahead and in this case, I'm going to go like I showed you before. I'm going to do format selection, right? Format width, and then I'll do prettier. Cool, right? didn't really change it much. I was doing a pretty good job of formatting my things pretty nicely, right? So your sections are aligned, your UIs are aligned. So in case for some reason you were writing them and they weren't. So let's add another section. Okay, how are we at? We're at almost 20 minutes here. So we'll end and start another one in a second. Let's do this next one. So in this next section, let's say, because we're going to do an ordered list. So let's say steps, okay, to make a sandwich. Okay, now in this case, oh, by the way, I forgot to put the heading, H2. And what I could do here is I could come down, I could select this text, and I could either drag it or I could copy and paste it. I could just drag it into here, and then that would make it go in between that H2. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do ordered list tab. Now, oh, let's do this. Ordered list. And in this case, let's do an LI again, and then times 3 again. And now, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you effective ways to write HTML. Okay. So now let's do get bread slices. Right. Add your fave fillings. Okay. You might have different steps. Put the slices together. I don't know. You know, if you're a fancy sandwich maker, do this more justice than I have. Okay. All right, let's come back over here and look at it again. Same thing, right? But we can see our page starting to get laid out here, which is cool. All right. So while we're here, why don't we go ahead now and before we continue on, let's do a little bit more styling. Okay, let's do main now, okay? Because we styled the header before, we saw that. So now let's just do a little bit of styling on the main itself. And let's do margin. Okay, now I want you to see this one. So I'm going to move mine over a little bit. Move this over a little bit so you can, because it's really nice to see it. I think that's my whole point, right? 15 pixels. That one was a little harder to see. Padding, 15 pixels. Oh, that one was a little easier to see. And if you don't see it, come into main, right? Come into here, right? Because anything in here now has main. If I click on main, if I take off the margin, oh, I can see that. And remember, this is a visual clue of what is there. Padding. Remember, padding now is 15 all the way around, each one of them. Okay, so it's just something that is a shortcut way of doing padding. Okay, so now let's do another background color. Okay, so background color here, I'm going to make it like a light blue, Alice blue. That's cool. And again, I can play with it. Please do. I could maybe make that a little. It's not great. I don't love it yet. Sometimes you gotta really play to get it that you love it. Okay, so this is starting to look a little better. I like it. I like what we've done so far. And we're at 26 minutes, so we're going to stop here. So you have one more commit, right? So then your last commit will be adding styling and ordered list. So you could just do adding, let's do main style and OL, right, for ordered list. That'll be your last commit for this video, and then you're going to have one more video, and then we'll be done with this particular one.